Welcome, everyone, to the Intentional Marriages Podcast. We're so grateful you joined us today. Today, we're going to talk about love and love's role in marriage. Seems kind of obvious, but we're going to dive on love and marriage. Sounds like a TV movie or something. Love and marriage.
You said deep dive.
I said deep dive? Let's start over.
Okay.
I said we're going to dive deep.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this week's episode of Intentional Marriages Podcast. And today we're going to talk about love and marriage. Love seems kind of obvious in marriage, but we're going to dive deep into what that means today.
It absolutely shocked me when we met up with my friend who was like a brother growing up. Mm-hmm. We met with him and his wife at a baseball game, and you were talking to the wife, and I was talking to him, and I was like, well, so how's your marriage going? They had just been married a couple of years, and I fully expected him to say, it's wonderful, fantastic, and he did say some of those things, but he also said, well, there's times where I have to choose to love my wife.
Choose?
I know. It was like, wait, back up, roll that back. Wait, what? That really did shock me, that there's a going out of love and coming back. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, there's just sometimes there's tension and I have to choose to love her during those times, just like she has to do the same for me. And I was part of that myth where I thought, we love each other so dearly, we'll never dip out of love. And I was not aware that would happen in marriage. I think our culture has been so influenced by the Disney narrative. You get married, you live happily ever after, and I loved you dearly.
And you're always passionately in love with each other.
Yes, and I really thought that's just how it plays out.
And in reality, after us being married, almost 22 years now, and all the 400 plus couples we've worked with, we realize there's often times in our marriage where we don't like our spouse. So we have to choose to love them because they're not very likable at times.
Right.
And you may even have times where, when you're really frustrated, when there's this part of your brain that says, man, this would be so much easier if we weren't married, right? And people think, oh no, wait a minute, I've fallen out of love. We no longer should be married. And that's not the case at all.
Right. And when we had tension shortly after we got married, it shocked me.
Yeah.
I had been on my own for 18 years. I wasn't making anybody mad. And I thought all our issues were you. Right?
Sure. There was nobody else to make you feel otherwise.
Exactly. So even though I knew all of that going in, I still was shocked by us having tension. And I thought, what does that mean? Right?
Yeah.
And we assume it means the worst.
Right. And as we've talked about in earlier episodes, early in our marriage, the first year, 2, 3, whatever, it was really hard.
Yeah.
And sometimes people ask us, well, why did you stay in it, when it was so hard? And I think there were multiple things, but two big ones. And that, first of all, was our faith. I mean, we were committed to each other. If we hadn't done the work with counseling over the years, we would still probably be married, but it wouldn't be a very happy marriage.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a healthy marriage at all. So I think faith was one thing that really got us to stick through the hard times. And then counseling helped tremendously. I mean, we got to a counselor actually before we got married, and we stayed with him after we've been married. And he has been incredible. And he helped us understand, look, this will get better. You've got to, if you do the work, it will get better. If you choose, love is a choice. If you choose to love your spouse when they're not likable and do the work, you will have the healthy marriage that you're wanting and desiring.
Right. I agree with the faith and the counseling. And for me also, I made vows. I said for better or for worse. And I don't think we put much emphasis on the worse, right?
Right.
Because we're supposed to be in love and it's happily ever after. But I knew that I had made a commitment and, okay, so this does feel worse.
Yeah.
But thank goodness we had counseling because I really needed somebody to speak into our marriage when it just felt confusing.
Right. That's a good word, because I think confusing is because wait a minute, I never dreamed that we were going to have this kind of tension in marriage.
Right.
But if we've learned, it's inevitable in all marriages, right?
Right.
So, well, and one of the reasons that, here's the thing about feelings. We talked about this in earlier episodes. that our feelings are automatic. So when we have a feeling, we can't not have that feeling in the moment as soon as it happens. Mm-hmm. But we have a choice of what we do with that feeling. And that's what, back to where the brain works, our subconscious or our amygdala gets flooded with, so if if our spouse does something and we don't feel cared for, or we don't feel appreciated or respected or even loved, that's our amygdala, that's our subconscious it's a feeling, right? But that doesn't, the problem with feelings is they're not accurate all the time.
Correct.
Right? The amygdala, subconscious, doesn't always deal in accuracy. A lot of times it just deals in perception, right? So just because in that moment we feel like our spouse doesn't care for us or doesn't respect us or appreciate us or even love us, doesn't mean that they don't love, appreciate, respect, and care for us, because they really do. It's just we're not feeling it in that moment, and we're saying, yeah, because of the way they treat us or their behavior. But once again, that doesn't mean they don't love us.
Right. And back to the better or worse vows, it's just like in those moments when we are struggling with our spouse. I made a commitment to be obedient. So like I'm making a commitment for my head to be obedient, and then eventually the feelings will follow. It's just the same way with like forgiveness. I may not feel like forgiving, but out of obedience I do. And eventually it hits my heart and the feelings will follow. So I think there's times in our marriage that we do have to be obedient. And just a caveat that this video is for couples who are struggling, not for couples where there's any harm being present.
Right.
So I just wanted to...
Yeah, we're not talking about abuse, within an abusive relationship, right? But,
right. Please seek professional help for those instances.
Absolutely. Kind of what we're talking about, back to the obedience thing, is what we like to call covenant love, right? Covenant love is love that's not based on my feelings. It's not based on your performance or how easy you are to love, right? Covenant love is I'm going to love you no matter what I feel, what your performance is, what your behavior is, or how easy you are to love. And so that is a whole different way of loving in marriage. And it's so important for our spouse to believe that we love them when they're their worst. That when they're their worst, that's not going to change how much we love them. We may not like them when they're at their worst, but we're going to still love them, and we're not going to abandon them when they're at their worst. That's so important.
And what love looks like to me is you're working on understanding your own feelings. You're working on understanding your spouse's feelings. And I don't think a spouse wakes up and thinks, oh, how am I going to hurt my wife or my husband today? Obviously, if that's happening, you have a much bigger issue.
Right.
But it's doing the work to understand, why does this make me so upset? Or why does he go to a 10 on this 2 circumstance? And that understanding will not eliminate the frustration you have with your spouse, but it will develop some compassion for them.
That's a great point. Let's continue that thread and dive a little deeper on what love as a choice looks like in action. What are some things that, some actionable things we can do that show what love is a choice?
Right. I'll confess one of mine as a turtle. I always like to retreat when there's tension. Mine in action, my love in action is coming back to a conversation, even when I don't want to.
Yeah. And for us tigers, as we talked about, tigers and turtles are, one of the things we need to do to show love as a choice is to pause when we're frustrated before we say something we're going to have to apologize for. So to pause, and then as we talked about in the frustration conversation episode, is go away and talk about, okay, what am I feeling? Well, I'm feeling embarrassed, disrespected, whatever it is, not appreciated. Well, wait a minute. Does Danielle appreciate me or respect me? Yeah, okay, well, maybe this is a little bit more about me than just what happened just now. So pause, for us tigers, pause, have that frustration conversation with ourselves. Another big one, I think, is empathy, right? And so when our spouse is hurting or shares something, is not to try to fix it, right? Fixing is not an action, unless they ask for it. Sometimes our spouse may say, hey, would you really help me here and help me come up with a solution? Okay, then love's a choice. But many times we're trying to fix when they want empathy. They just want us to sit and their pain and their frustration with them and not try to fix it and just empathize. That was a really hard one for me.
I was just about to say, you're talking like you're an empathy expert.
No. Took me a long time to learn empathy. Way too long. You know, and it could be little simple things like putting a note, you know, leaving notes for our spouse about how much we care about them before we head out for the day. It's coming up and giving them a hug from behind. I mean, even when we don't feel like it, we don't feel like we want to hug them, but we go up and hug them. It's learning what they need from us to feel emotionally safe so they can share hard things with us. It's being intentional, it's being intentional to learn what their top needs are, their top relational needs or their love languages are, and in trying to meet those. That's being, even when we feel like they're not doing it with us, love as a choice and action is doing things whether they're doing them or not.
Right. And for me, it was learning how to use a softened startup,
Yes.
which takes some thought because you just want to go in and say, well, how come you didn't do this?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, wait, let me recognize. Thank you so much for working hard. I see you're really hyper-focused working right now. Just wanted to mention that, hey, this other thing didn't get taken care of.
Right.
You know, it's taken the time to recognize, I think you're great. I love you, but still expressing your frustration. So using a softened startup is love in action.
Yeah, and what I love there is that it's being conscientious that even though I'm frustrated, I'm going to communicate in a kind tone voice, and not a disgusted facial expression, right? But just, hey, I know you do a beautiful job of that with a softened startup.
Oh,
It's
thank
been
you.
so great, so grateful for that. It's been so helpful in our marriage.
Thank you.
So.
Another one is tell me more. And this one's really hard because the minute your spouse says something that you're like, oh, that stung, you want to be defensive right away. And when you say, you know, tell me more about how you experienced me like that, or tell me more about that feeling, honestly, on the inside, I still may be gritting my teeth. But I'm choosing to stay and listen and act like an investigative reporter and just because the more I ask questions, the more information I'm going to get instead of assuming or having to defend my position. Tell me more, especially when they say something you don't like, is huge love in action.
I love that example that love is a choice when our spouse says something we don't like or agree with, that we get curious instead of trying to convince them that they shouldn't feel that way or that they're wrong and we're right. That's one of my favorite ways of love as a choice.
Right. None of these actions are neutral. They all require effort.
Absolutely. Love as a choice shows up as an action in these ways. So think about, as you're saying, think about how it shows up in actions, how love as a choice shows up in actions. I love that. All right, so let's talk about the marriage where one spouse is doing a ton of work and the other spouse is not doing any work or very little work.
Those are really hard.
And we have those, but they still are going to stay married. We see people stay married in really, really hard marriages because of their faith. Sometimes it could be because of children. They don't want to split up because of the children. A lot of times because of fear of failure. I don't want to be looked at as a failure.
Right.
So sometimes people often stay in marriages where one person's doing work and the other one's not. And so what we tell people is the one that's doing the work will come to us and say, what do I do? And I'm like, well, keep doing the work. For a couple things will happen if you do your work and you choose to love them as a choice, even though they're not doing that on their side. They didn't feel like they're doing it on their side.
Right.
And I said, first of all, your expectations will go down. And as your expectations go down, it'll take pressure off your spouse and that'll pull them to you. The problem with expectations is it pushes our spouse away.
Yeah.
And so if we lower our expectations, it lowers the pressure on our spouse and it kind of pulls them in. Second thing, what if we do these things that we talked about, the actions that show that love is that we're choosing love, even when we may not be liking our spouse very much in the moment, is it models for them what to do. And modeling is so much better than words, right? So if we model that we are choosing to love them through all these actions, even though they're not doing it, it just typically models for them and they start doing some of them as well.
It's almost like throwing water on a fire.
Yeah.
It just takes, because they're expecting you to come back with words or shut down.
Right.
And when you do the opposite, it's like, wait, whoa, what's happening here?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, I know it's hard and it doesn't seem fair, but we've talked about this before. If fairness is your objective for marriage, you're going to have a pretty frustrating marriage because your definition of fair versus their definition of fair is going to be completely different. So I know it doesn't seem fair, but it's one of the best ways to show love as a choice is to model these actions that we've talked about, regardless if they're doing them or not.
We were also advised that when you're in a really hard season, all seasons come and go.
Right.
So it's really important not to make really big decisions during those temporary seasons and in hopes that you are doing your work even if your spouse isn't.
Yeah, and if you're in one of those seasons, and what happens is, once again, back to our subconscious, when we're in a really hard season in our marriage, our brain tells us, our nervous system tells us it's going to be this way forever.
Right.
And if we'll do the work, that's not the case. Or sometimes we don't have to do a lot of work. We just get out of that season and circumstances are different, so things get a little bit better. But we would encourage you, when you're in a really hard season, really seek out help from a counselor or a mentor and get some help navigating that really tough season. We use the analogy that when we're in tough seasons, it's like doing marriage in 100-mile-an-hour winds. And it's really hard to do marriage well in 100-mile-an-hour winds, so get some help. Right. As you may realize now, when we talk about love being a choice and the actions that we need to do to exhibit love as a choice, is we have to be very intentional. And intentionality is the antidote to the slow drift.
Right.
If we're not intentional, we're going to slowly drift apart.
And
right?
drift into becoming roommates.
Exactly.
Because if you're intentional, that means you're not coasting. And boy, isn't it easy? You get married, you get busy with life, kids come along. Yeah, that your relationship almost gets a back burner feel and, well, we'll just coast just to get through this busy season. Right. And all of a sudden this busy season ends up being 18 years or until you launch your last kid.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And then you look up and you're like, oh, so participating in marriage, even when you're tired, even when you're frustrated, is what being intentional looks like. Yeah. Thankfully, research shows that it's not grand gestures that make a marriage great. It's the 1,000 small decisions you make along the way.
Right.
So it's not the big trip or a fancy dinner date. Thank goodness, right? But it's those daily thousands of small decisions along the way.
Yeah, and one of the best ways that we believe we can be intentional is I think what we call the weekly check-in. And next week's episode, we're going to go into detail about it. So I'll wait till then. Come back next week if you want to hear all about it. But it's one of the best ways we've learned to be intentional in our marriage is to do this weekly check-in. All right, so we also want to acknowledge those of you that are absolutely exhausted. You feel like you've been doing this for more than a season, that you've been in a really hard place in your marriage for a long time. And we want to acknowledge that. Yeah. And we understand just how hopeless that can feel. And so, our encouragement is stay in the fight, seek help, try to work on yourself, get your spouse to work on themselves, and then you work together. That's the best medicine we've seen is when people, if you've been in a long, long season and you're kind of hopeless, please reach out and seek help.
Yeah, and looking back, it felt like the first dozen years were hard for me. But I found that having those hard conversations with our counselor along the way, it would feel like 2 steps forward, 3 back, 2 steps forward, 2 back. And like slowly over time, it got better and better. And now looking back, I'm like, thank goodness we took the time and the investment. Had we not had a counselor involved in speaking into our marriage, I would have felt very lost and lonely. And I really needed somebody smarter than me, smarter than us, to help guide us along the way.
Absolutely.
It's very hard for us to be objective inside our own marriage.
Yeah, and as we always talk about, we'll get help, coaches, trainers, whether it's our accountant, of our finances, or it's a business coach, or it's health. Anything, we get coaches in everything, but for some reason we won't get help in our marriage, which is the most important relationship. If we get help in our marriage and it's going well, usually the rest of our life goes a lot better.
Yes.
Right? Whether it's our health or our job or our finances tend to go a lot better.
And I think we've come a long way at at killing the stigma of reaching out for help. I mean, mental health is now openly talked about. I think we're still behind the eight ball on marriages seeking help, because if I go to seek help, oh, that must mean I'm one of those couples that's on the brink of divorce. And that's not the case.
Right.
If you're intentional, at least go 4 times a year. It's so powerful what you pour into your marriage just by checking in with an expert.
Yeah, be intentional and go proactively.
Right.
Don't wait till you think there's trouble.
Right.
Yeah. Well, good. All right. So let's wrap this up with some takeaways. The first will remind you that love is a choice. It's not the myth that it's a feeling. Love is a choice.
Right. And love as a choice looks like the softened startup.
Right. So be intentional with the actions. Right. And remember that intentionality is the antidote to the slow drift. And it's actually the antidote to a lot of challenges in marriage if we'll just be intentional.
Right. And remember to seek help. That's a sign of love. You doing your own work, and then hopefully eventually both of you doing the work.
Absolutely. Well, wonderful. Hope you've enjoyed this as we talk about love and its role in marriage. Next week, we're going to talk about the weekly check-in, as we mentioned earlier, and it's been one of the best things for our marriage.
And I'll share what not to do, but
Can't wait to hear about that.
But come back next week to hear more about the weekly check-in.
Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.